It's great to have everyone on here today, and welcome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see all of the lovely panelists we have here this morning, and certainly just want to give a warm welcome to you all. My name is Madeline Jelpy, pronouns anything respectful, and I'm the Senior Manager of Stakeholder Engagement here at Out and Equal. So we hope you enjoyed that first session at Southern Forum. Really are geared up for a robust day of content. This morning, I'm particularly excited about the conversation we have planned for you all with Milliken here this morning. And in just a moment, I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you all. But before we begin that conversation, I want to just first say how immensely grateful we are at Out and Equal to have worked with our friends at Milliken over the years. I've personally gotten to know their great work and in LGBTQ inclusion, and I'm so excited to be able to allow them to share their story with you all in just a moment in what we believe is a truly excellent case study in building LGBTQ inclusive efforts in the South. So before we do that, I'll just talk a little bit more about what it means to do this kind of work in the South. Out and Equal, as perhaps you all know, we began our Southern States Initiative with the understanding that there are so many rich opportunities in the South for deepening ally engagement, deepening engagement in LGBTQ inclusion. And as Dina mentioned in that opening panel, the South is home to the largest proportion of LGBTQ families, the largest proportion of LGBTQ individuals in the entire country, which also includes the largest proportion of LGBTQ families in states like Georgia and Mississippi, and a community that in itself is rich in diversity, with 41% of the community being people of color and 2 out of 5 transgender people living in the South. And so, as we all know, I think on this call that, we face as the Southern LGBTQ community a whole host of complex and unique challenges, the legal and cultural challenges that affect LGBTQ Southerners' daily life. And so many people consider the South to be one of the most hostile landscapes in the U.S. for LGBTQ individuals, with anti-LGBTQ policies, economic hardships, and then some of those conflicts with those key cornerstones of Southern life, including a centralization around faith and social conservatism. And so it's important to think of that as we dive into conversations around these ERG efforts and what it truly means to do this work in the South. But the story of LGBTQ Southerners is one of resilience, and it's one of innovation, community, and that fight for inclusion is certainly very strong. And businesses like Milliken, they are uniquely positioned to provide protections and safe spaces for LGBTQ people that might not otherwise exist. They can often be the first place where LGBTQ folks are feeling as though they belong. The first place where allies are engaged in conversations around LGBTQ identity. So suffice it to say, inclusion and belonging in the workplace is so vitally important for the LGBTQ community, especially in the South. And so knowing this, Milliken began their LGBTQ journey a few years ago. And over the course of that time, we've had the pleasure of working with them through our Southern States Initiative to support those efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I just have to say, when Milliken began their journey to LGBTQ inclusion, they hit the ground running. They have consistently demonstrated how a company can ask the right questions, possess the curiosity, the motivation, and dedication to do something greater for the LGBTQ community. They are a global company, family-owned, founded in 1865, headquartered in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I see a number of you on our call hail from that region and have locations globally across the world. And they're also well known and recognized for their commitment to values, integrity, and ethics in business. For 13 consecutive years, Milliken has earned a spot on the world's most ethical companies list. And companies who are included on that list, they are sophisticated in cultivating a culture of integrity and measuring whether employees feel comfortable speaking up, viewing leadership as trustworthy, and making sure that the company is an ethical place to be. And so Milliken's workplace culture, and even my first visit to the company, I heard from every person I sort of interacted with that how wonderful it was to work there. And they mentioned how much it was a company that truly cared for the well-being of its employees. And so to see a Southern company that is working towards this, towards merging Southern values and business ethics with LGBTQ inclusion is really incredible. And from a personal standpoint, incredibly inspiring to me. So today we wanted to highlight that journey with them and host a discussion with the leaders who have worked at Milliken to make that happen. So there's certainly a lot we can learn from their story and a lot that they can share with all of you here who all may be just getting started in your own journeys and efforts at your company. So to start us off, I'm going to first let the panelists introduce themselves and hear from them a little bit more about who they are and why they are so passionate about this work and why it is personally important to them. So I'll turn it over first to Ottilia to kick us off there. Thank you all so much for joining. Oh, I think you're on mute, Ottilia.
There we go.
There we go.
Didn't we say that somebody was going to leave themselves on mute and start talking? So
always happens.
So again, good morning now that you all can hear me. My name is Ottilia Scanlon. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a part of the Leadership Steering Committee for our Milliken Pride ERG. My full-time job at Milliken is as the Director of Learning and Development. And again, I'm so excited to be here and so incredibly proud of Milliken for sponsoring this event. And to answer Madeline's question of why this work is important to me, it's important to me both personally as well as professionally. On the professional side, as the leader of our learning and development group, I'm involved in D&I training and have been for quite some time. And I have a passion for creating an inclusive environment here at Milliken. Being a leader in the Pride Network specifically became very important and very personal to me a couple of years ago when my then 20-year-old child came home from college and sat me down and said, "Mom, I'm gay." And then a couple months later, "Mom, I'm transgender." And so it was during those conversations that this passion became very personal. And it was because I saw this really amazing, really awesome, really super fantastic human being who happens to be my child in a ton of pain and afraid of living their true authentic life because of how people treated them, or a fear of how people were going to treat them because of who they were and who they love. And that's not fair, and that's wrong, and it hurt my mama heart. And so in those moments, I knew that I needed to be better, and I needed to be more, and I needed to be that real, true, honest ally and that honest advocate for love and for acceptance. And so that's why this work has become so important to me and why I'm so proud to be involved in the Milliken Pride Network.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great story. Awesome. And I'll turn it over to George next.
Good morning. Thanks, Madeline. I'm George Shira. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for the Chemicals Division here at Milliken. And, you know, professionally, this is an easy answer for me. We are constantly trying to attract the most talented, highest potential people all over the world. We have folks at Milliken, we have people in every region, every continent. And so to eliminate any group is a real bad idea for us. So from a personal standpoint, though, earlier in my career, one of my colleagues, someone I worked quite closely with, he was not out at work. And as I watched our careers develop, we faced very similar challenges, but his life was so much more difficult than mine. because he had to spend energy covering, he couldn't be his authentic self, to a huge portion of the people he interacted with every day. And it really struck me. And at the time, all I could do was be his friend. Fast forward 20 years, and when we started to talk about, creating this network, I was happy to volunteer to be the leader, because I really believe in Milliken as a company, and I'm proud to work here. And honestly, I don't want others to face the same challenges that my friend did. And I can do something about it now, and I can help create the open environment that you heard Halsey describe earlier. And so that's why I'm here. Really happy to be here too. So thanks.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and it's these personal stories, they really cement why this work is so important. And when we add that to the business case as well, it just makes sense why we're doing this. So thanks for that, George. I'll turn it over to you, Barrett.
Thank you so much. So my name is Barrett Kanation. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a global marketing specialist within our chemical division at Milliken. For me, I've had several friends who identify within the community. Growing up, I always saw the struggles they had, both from a interpersonal standpoint, but then also an intrinsic standpoint. So this has always been a passion for me, just because I've always seen the issues that they've dealt with. I've been a part of this similar ERG at my previous companies. And then now, as a father of two young kids who are 4 and 1, I grew up in the South in Greenville, South Carolina. The city has changed drastically over the last 20 or 30 years, but I want to make sure that I am creating an environment and creating a world where they can feel comfortable to live their true selves, and not have to deal with some of the issues that my friends did, or other members of the community dealt with. So for me, it's always been around equality. And while several factors can kind of determine your rights, who you are intrinsically and who you love shouldn't be two of those factors. So for me, it's always been a very personal issue, and so proud of the work that Milliken has done. I definitely echo a lot of what Otilia said, and I know we'll get into it a little bit more during this panel, but we've done some really great work, and very, very proud to be a Milliken associate.
Thank you for that. That's great. And it is so wonderful to see all of from our Out and Equal standpoint, what Milliken is doing. Certainly, I feel pride in it as well, just from a distance. So I'll turn it over to Dave last.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm Dave Brothers. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a business applications developer at Milliken by day, so I get to go around and help our other Milliken associates and lines of business with websites and services and things that help them do their job. So I get to interact with lots of people in our great organization. And then, so that's by day. And then by day, I manage and work with the community committee for our Pride ERG. So I get to kind of help identify opportunities for engagement and visibility within the community. Within our geographic community specifically. I'm really passionate about this issue because I'm an LGBTQ individual living in the upstate of South Carolina. So it's important for me to be able to, be who I am and bring my whole authentic self everywhere I go, so that I can leave everything a little better than I found it. That's a principle that really means a lot to me. And when I live where we do now, we already have such a vibrant, exceptional, really cool community and place that we live in. And this is definitely one area that I think we could do some work in to improve that community and to bolster it and make it excel even more than it already does. So being a part of that and helping be an agent for change for that, that it means a lot to me. And so I'm honored to be able to help contribute to that mission, both as a Milliken associate and as a person that lives here.
Thanks for that, Dave. Appreciate you sharing that, and so glad you're here. All right, now let's get into some conversation with our panelists here. I'm going to go through, and I certainly have a lot of questions I want to bring out for you all on the audience side to hear more about what Milliken has done over the last few years. We will have some some time at the end for you all to ask our panelists some questions as well. But I want to start off by asking, why was it important to begin this journey of LGBTQ inclusion at Milliken, and what sort of prompted you all to get started? And I'll pass it over to Ottilia first for that, to hear more about where this all began and what was the motivation there.
Thank you, Madeline. And I am off mute now, so I can go ahead and get started. We began our D&I journey at Milliken in about 2017 with the formation of a Diversity and Inclusion Council. And since then, we've implemented diverse recruiting practices. We've launched mentoring and sponsorship programs, training classes, and so much more. I'm really, really proud of the work that Raquel Harris, who you all heard from earlier this morning, has done to build that framework. And I share all of that because I think a really strong D&I framework is important for LGBTQ inclusion. It can't be a standalone thing. It needs to be a part of a bigger infrastructure. And another part of our D&I framework or infrastructure included the creation, as Halsey stated earlier, of those 4 ERGs, the Women's Network, the Minorities Network, the Veterans Network, and our New Kids on the Block network. And when Raquel launched those networks, she asked our leaders and our associates, what's missing? What do we need to add? And the overwhelming response was an LGBTQ network. So our employees asked for this inclusion. And in addition to that, we know from our own research, from talking to potential candidates, from talking to customers, from talking to community partners, that companies that get L&D right, or D&I right, companies who are leaders in this space, they embrace LGBTQ inclusion. And in addition, we did some research. We're a research and innovation company. And so we like to research and we want to know what's going on in our communities. And we know from our research that over 100,000 LGBTQ individuals live in the state of South Carolina. 9,000 live in the city of Spartanburg, which is where Milliken is headquartered. These are our people. These are our friends, our neighbors, our family members, our coworkers. And in one survey that we looked at, 38% of individuals said, I'm worried about being fired because I'm a part of the community. And 23% were told, don't tell anybody you're a part of the LGBTQ community. And at Milliken, we don't want our associates to experience that. We want to be an employer of choice. We want to attract and retain the best of the best. As George said earlier, we want to be a place where all people are welcomed and valued. And so for us, the catalyst, Madeline, honestly, was living our D&I mission, which says that at Milliken, we define diversity as welcoming all and inclusion as valuing and embracing their differences and their perspectives. And so we firmly believe, as a part of our Milliken values, that if we don't include the LGBTQ community as an integral part of our foundational D&I efforts, that we're not embracing our communities. We're not being authentic. We're not being real. We're not living our Milliken values. So really, that was the catalyst for us.
Thank you for that. And I love that you brought in so many pieces just then about the research and knowing knowing who's out there and how big our community is, and responding to that need within your company, knowing that this is such an important part of the diversity and inclusion mission, and that it's an important part of Milliken's mission itself. So thank you for that. That is excellent to hear. Now I want to talk a little bit about the South. I mentioned before about some of those unique challenges we face as people who are working and living in the South. And so naturally, those unique idiosyncrasies that I guess are involved in the Southern workplace are going to drive how we do D&I. They're going to affect exactly how we, how we roll these things out. So I'm curious, what were some of those regional and organizational challenges you considered in building these efforts, and how might that be similar for some of the other folks on our call who are also trying to start an ERG maybe in South Carolina or or more broadly in the South? What were some of those things that you perhaps considered? And let's hear maybe a bit about how you addressed them. And I'll turn it over to George for that question.
Thank you. Like many of the folks who are in this forum, religion is a way of life in the South. And let's face it, in our region, it is largely Christian and predominantly Protestant. And there's a wide spectrum of acceptances among denominations. And so I see it as sort of two sides to look at it. There are a lot of folks who are Christians and really have a lot of deep religious beliefs, but who are very accepting of the community. And on the other side of the card, there are other people who are not. And so one of the challenges for us is, we were worried, right? We start this and is this going to create controversy? Are we going to have a meeting and it go the wrong way or something like that? And so the way that we remedied that is with education. And it was with help of Out and Equal, some of our board members, other folks who are involved with Milliken, people like Halsey Cook. We had to create what I call a safe space. We had to create an environment where, hey, you can believe what you want to believe, but at work, there's a standard of behavior that we've got. And honestly, that safe space creation is really, that's really critical to our success. Another challenge that we had at Milliken is, we don't have a senior leader who is someone who is visibly LGBTQ part of the community. And so, there wasn't like that senior level person that could say, hey, here's what's important to me, or here's what's important to my community. And honestly, again, with help from Out and Equal, as well as we benchmarked a lot of employee research groups. And one of the things we found was that, many groups are largely comprised of allies. And so our group is the same, led by an ally. If you look at the numbers, in some cases, it's almost 90% of LGBTQ ERGs are allies. And so by making it sort of what I would call an ally-friendly network, it created just an even more safe space. And so when you see, high-level people who are part of the network but not part of the community, it makes the people who are part of the community feel safe and know that they can be who they need to be at work. Those are really how we overcame what I think are not unique challenges to our area. So.
Thanks for that. And yeah, I think you raise a really important point about allyship and how, especially in southern states or areas where it may not feel as safe to be out, that allies are sort of those door openers for a lot of people. When an LGBTQ person gets that signal that there are people who will accept me should I come out in my workplace, you're going to be more inclined to do that. Those signals and the ally engagement is critically important to that. And it's wonderful to hear that there are so many allies engaged, because ultimately that does drive, like what you were saying, George, that safe space. And pointing to another thing that you brought up in how those regional challenges of religion being something that can also cause conflict in someone's acceptance of LGBTQ people. There's a lot of values conversations that typically happen around LGBTQ inclusion and things like that. So messaging is really important in how we build out these initiatives and talk to people about them. And so I'm curious, when you all got started, and as you're continuing to grow your efforts, how have you crafted communications surrounding your initiatives? And getting back to that values piece, more specifically, how have you worked to integrate values of LGBTQ inclusion into the values and mission within Milliken as a company? And I believe I'll turn it to Dave for that question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. As George alluded to, having these spaces, right, where people can come and have these conversations is so important to facilitating the engagement. The additional nuance to that is being willing and able to meet people where they are, right? And it sort of, as we heard this morning in the open plenary, right, the extension of grace back and forth. Everybody's in a different place. The human experience is so vast. So when you get down looking to where individuals are, everyone's going to be somewhere different. And you got to give grace and you got to show respect and you've got to be able to talk about that, right? And to let people be where they are and not expect to push or pull them to somewhere they're not. You give tools and you facilitate and you create relationships and you engage. One of the things that we've tried to do is really lean into some intersectionalities as well, especially with some of our other D&I groups, with some of our other associate groups, with some of our other things that we do within the community and within the company itself, so that we can create more common ground, right? We all have a lot of differences, but we also have a lot of similarities. And we can accentuate that, then people can feel more comfortable to sort of expound upon that and create a broader experience for everybody. Highlighting what we do that way, it creates a natural and a naturally respectful, generally we found, segue into understanding each other's experiences and being able to sort of capitalize on that knowledge together. So that's the sort of a high level. At a low level, a really big part of our story and our messaging conveys this, I think, is that we're driven a lot by our ethics, and our ethics speak to being an organization that gives service, right? We give service to our other associates, we give service to ourselves, we give service to our community. And to George's education point, right? Education is a first-class form of service to people. So we've really tried hard to engage with all that. Y'all Without an Equal have come out and engaged with us on campus to help give discussions to people and facilitate conversations. Our L&D group have even grown out of that into our own Words Matter course, where we get to talk to people about the impact of your words and what they mean and how they affect your relationships and what they do with people. I'll use a word that I think some people might be tired of hearing in 2020, but education is viral, right? It really is, the way it behaves and the way it acts, right? What's the first thing you do when you learn something super cool, right? You want to go tell somebody, you want to go share that information, you want to go extend that experience out. So we want to be the spark that ignites that flame for a lot of that. Some of the ways that we've done that, in acting out that messaging, we had a Milliken associate panel where we had over half a dozen people with different experiences get up in front of our coworkers, right, and talk about our experiences and met people where they were, and the response was astounding. People just on the spot sharing their own experiences, opening up, meeting in the middle with all of these things. It just really so organic, the kind of authentic dialogue and expression that came out of that. So when we took that messaging and put it into action, right, it really came out a lot. And we act that out in other ways too, right? We become visible. We go outside of Milliken as well. We've sponsored our Upstate Pride March 2019, since there really wasn't people getting together much this year. We're showing by action and participation, right, that we value this 150 plus year legacy of showing up for our community and engaging with that. So to talk about how we use the word integrating those values and doing that, I'll kind of flip that around a little bit for our answer, not to be too reductive, but our statement as a corporation begins with and is condensed to together we strive, right? That's our statement. That's what we do. And if we're being realistic and if we're being authentic about that statement, as we are, right, and the way we mean to be, because it's natural, then it follows naturally that this is what we do, because together is everybody. Together's not just a couple of people or a subset of people or a certain attitude, right? Together is the whole experience. So we've really stretched to do that some. We've had an entire rebranding of some of our D&I efforts to be just the words "I'm in," right? I'm in. Everybody, everything together. It's just been, it's come together almost naturally. Like, again, not to reduce it, but it's we followed our hearts and we followed our ethics, and it's led us down that road very naturally.
I love so much about what you said, Dave. I mean, there's so much in that answer that people can sort of take away. That idea of education being sort of a gift to people, and giving people grace, which is something we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the day, and meeting people where they are is such an important place to start. And these critical conversations you've had with folks, I mean, that what you just described about people getting up and sharing their stories and communicating about their experiences is such a human experience that really brings together what all of this means, what LGBTQ inclusion is about, what inclusion and belonging as a whole is about, and how you've integrated that and use your own company values to drive that together we strive. And I love the I'm in campaign, like, period, I'm in. What a great message to send to folks. And the fact that, you know, you have so much support across the company is really incredible to see that. I get chills just thinking about, you know, that story and the conversation. Rickay, I believe, told me a little bit about that, and it's powerful to see what you all are doing there. Now I'll turn it over to, you know, we've talked a little bit about programming, and so I want to turn a little bit more to that specifically, and when you're developing programming and delivering programming, what have you prioritized to get people engaged, and what were some of the challenges that you encountered? You know, of course, as we're building any of these efforts, we're going to encounter some hard things to overcome. So I'm curious, you know, when you did encounter things that were difficult, how have you worked to overcome them? So I'll turn to Barrett for that question.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. Yeah, it's you know, it's definitely an interesting thought, and we kind of separated those out. So first for us was more about the structure of our ERG. We didn't want this just to be another ERG and you were just a random participant in it. We really wanted to create some structure so we could be very focused in our efforts. So we created 3 subcommittees. The first was around our Milliken associates, and this is really ensuring that all the employees that work within the 4 walls of Milliken have all the resources they need to understand about the LGBTQ community. So a lot of the educational panels, a lot of the Words Matter courses, a lot of the resources were focused to ensure that our Milliken associates were aware of the LGBTQ issues and why Milliken was pursuing this ERG and why we were so passionate about bringing this into our D&I efforts. The second was, you know, what Dave alluded to around the upstate community. You know, it's great if we get everyone inside our 4 walls to be bought in and educated, but we really wanted to let the upstate know that, you know, we are here, you know, we see you, we love you, and that Milliken is a company that supports all people, and we will be very active, and we will use our voice to ensure that everyone in the upstate community has the same rights. You know, Otilia mentioned, you know, these are people that work for us, they're our families, they're our neighbors, they're our friends. You know, we want to make sure that as one of the largest employers in the upstate, we ensure that the citizens of the upstate feel like this is a safe place where they want to stay, where they want to grow their families. And we want to make sure that we took an active role in that. So things like the Pride March, other community events, we have a committee kind of focused on that. And then our third committee, which is the one I lead, is around Milliken and public policies. And that is more kind of twofold. One, internally to ensure that all of our HR policies, everything we're doing inside our 4 walls, that there's no discrimination in regards to LGBTQ. And, you know, Milliken was way ahead of its time even before the ERG in terms of doing all that. So, you know, we were kind of good there, but really from a public policy standpoint, and this is where I became really interested. You know, we saw a lot of things that have happened in 2020 around the justice system and, you know, things that can be fixed in our public policy. And this was more for us to understand local, state, national level policies that could not only affect employment, but also just people in our community. A perfect example here in Greenville, there was a family values resolution on the books from 1996 that talked about how members of the LGBTQ community pose a threat to family values and they should not be welcomed in our community. And of course, Greenville has changed dramatically over the course of 20 plus years. And that resolution was finally rescinded in 2019. And this was before our ERG was formed, and we had several of our employees that attended the council meeting and spoke up in favor of sunsetting that resolution. But moving forward, any other situations like that, that would be a really great example where this committee could take an active voice in saying, no, we as Milliken employing people in our upstate community feel like this resolution needs to be rescinded and sunsetted. And we can take an active role in ensuring that the policies of the upstate community where we have so many employees move towards one of equality, ensuring that all people feel safe here. And that's really the role of that third kind of subcommittee. So each of those committees for us as leaders allow us to focus our efforts and to create programming that's very specific, but then also ensure that our associates, if they do have a personal passion, have a group that they can now join, and they're just not, part of a larger sea. They can actually choose to swim in a particular lane and really focus their efforts. So that was really around the structure. And then kind of what we prioritized goes back to a lot of what Dave said. We really just prioritized openness. There was zero expectation. There was zero knowledge required to be a part of the ERG, to come to our events. The panel that Dave mentioned, we had people who were part of the community, who had been active in it for years. And then we had people who were there and said, this is not how I grew up. This is not what I grew up believing. I know the world is changing and I want to learn. And I think that gave me a lot of pride, because it showed that we created a safe enough environment where somebody felt okay to say that in a group of, 50, 60 of their associates, but they were truly there to learn. And, you change one mind at a time, and then slowly other people start to have that same sort of conversation, and they start to have that same sort of beliefs. So I think having that openness, doing a lot of the words matter educational courses, making sure we're all speaking the same language. A lot of people didn't understand, what do all the letters stand for, and, LGBTQIA, or as we talk about, more around a gender identity. So just ensuring that everyone knew what those words were, and that we were all speaking the same language. So I think we did a great job in prioritizing that openness. From a challenges standpoint, there were really two. And the first is, obviously we are very passionate about, what we do, the four people on this panel. So there's a lot of things that we would like to keep on doing, but sometimes you have to realize the audience or your ERG may not move as fast as you do. This understanding around the LGBTQ community and the issues, it's a very complex one. Not only do you have the sexual orientation piece, you have the gender identity piece. There's a lot to kind of learn. So, again, you have to meet your associates where they are. So while we wanted to do a lot of things, we had to kind of realize, let's make sure our associates are ready for that next step of programming. So that's just something for companies to think about as they think about all the things they want to do as part of their ERG. COVID obviously threw a major wrench into 2020, but we did good. We continue to do our virtual events, and I think you would be surprised how much just getting people on a Zoom or a Teams call and just having an open forum for them to talk, how much that can do to their mental health. Everyone working from home, you have no idea what everyone is dealing with on a personal level. So just being able to check in, having a coffee chat, ensuring that they understand that, we're still here, we're still listening, we don't have to be in the office to do that. I think that was a great way that we overcame some of the challenges of being remote. And we did a great job with that. So, and then the last thing I'd say is, this was mentioned in the plenary with Walmart doing the pins. Any small changes that your associates suggest or bring up, there doesn't need to be, 3 or 4 levels of red tape to get it done. If it's a small thing, just do it. And that creates such a level of confidence in your associates that, hey, this is actually a group that's making change. It's just not another ERG that's going to, talk and do, and do nothing. And, some of those changes, they can be so small, but they have such a large impact. So I think, overall, we had the really good structure, and then we prioritized that openness as it came to how we deliver our content.
Thank you for that. All of that that you mentioned is so helpful, and the way you've broken it down in committees and thought about the different ways people might want to engage in an ERG is good for companies to consider when they are building out these efforts. So thank you for that. And I also, want to echo what you said about the COVID times too, and how these small things can make a big difference. And whether it's getting on a Zoom or when we're thinking about the inclusion efforts themselves, I think this was reflected in our opening panel as well, that those little things do matter. They do, little actions do demonstrate that this is moving forward, there's progress, and that is encouraging to people. And important for them to see that it's not just all talk. There's things behind that as well. Thank you for that. And moving on to the next question, and we've heard from your CEO Halsey this morning, and he's such an incredible guy, and we're so grateful to witness his leadership and to see how Milliken has such strong support from senior leadership around your initiatives. So I want to ask you all, how did you make the case for getting them involved? I think there are, we hear often that people struggle with that and getting their ERG started. So if you have any tips or can you tell us how you were able to make people, your senior leaders, sort of get interested and get into the conversation? And what impact has that support had, particularly from your CEO, Halsey Cook, on your ability to have success? And I'll turn that over to George.
Thank you, Madeline. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for this because the support was always there, particularly from the highest levels. We're talking Milliken family members, shareholders, the board. You heard from Halsey earlier. I mean, he is a real champion for this cause and really for D&I across the board. Even in our network, our network sponsor is David Moody, who is one of our division presidents. So, I mean, the senior leadership, the support is visible. It is there. Where I think we have seen the biggest growth and support is really, it's sort of the middle levels, right? And it's through what you've heard some of our panelists talk about today is creating events, creating forums, creating opportunities for our associates to share their stories and to learn. And really that kind of open environment is what has enabled us to have the success that we have. We're really fortunate to work for a company like this that has that kind of support. In my opinion, it is the most critical piece to a successful LGBTQ network. I mean, you have to have that highest level of support. And so I think to build it, I think you look at what the case studies say, you look at the data that's there. So many people are part of this community or are allies of this community. If you don't focus on them, if you don't give them what they need, you're losing so many employees. You're losing so much innovation, so much talent. So it's just absolutely critical to have that kind of support and alignment.
Thanks, George. And yeah, I think that you highlighted this in your earlier statement about that business case for doing this, and just now the recruiting talent, keeping them there, and that is for those who have less supportive leaders or who need the ear of their senior leaders a bit more. I think that those data points are really powerful pieces in sort of moving people to get involved. And it's awesome to see at Milliken how the support of senior leadership really has been such a piece in your success as well, and how that does make a difference. Moving on to some more advice, I guess, for those listening in on today's call. We do have people here at Southern Forum this year who, again, are newer to this and may be trying to build out these efforts. So for those who are doing this in the South, what would you say, what advice would you offer to them in getting started and expanding and getting people engaged? I'll turn that over to you, Dave. I know you have some information for us there.
Yeah, thanks. So we sort of distilled it down to the ABCD of actionable items that you can do. The A is for authenticity, right? You've got to be authentic in your mission and about who you are and about your values. And that opens up an overall framework that you can work on. So you approach it with, from a place of caring and being genuine, and lots of other things and opportunities will follow that just because you're being authentic. The B is for buy-in. And we've talked about this a couple of times, addressing other things, right? You've got to have the buy-in, the executive support. It's got to be from the top. When that visibility happens, that action and that messaging, that drives the culture at every level, because people look to that, right? They look to see, what kind of persona does my company have, and where do I fit in with that? And so when they see that being shown from the top down, it's much easier to fall in. You get the buy-in from everybody when it starts at the top. Also, when it's bought into, speaking to the LGBTQ piece specifically, when it's part of a larger corporate D&I strategy, right? You can't have a pie without many slices when you cut it, right? And this is one slice of the pie, and it's an awesome pie when you put them all together, right? Because you've got intersectionalities, you've got places that you can lean on to other groups and share those experiences and some of the things we've talked about before. So you buy in as an organization, and then you buy in as a function. And that's very concrete. The C is for committees. Our structure, right, with the 3 committees that Barrett covered, those were just right for us. There was sort of like a brainstorming session where it was like, what are the shortest happy paths to the most efficacious changes that we can push out as part of this thing? How can we do the most service and do the most good? And so that's how we identified those 3 branches, right? The Milliken Associates, the Upstate Community, and the Public and Milliken Policies. That story should probably be different for every organization, right? That's not a shoe for every foot. But at the same time, you've got to know yourself well enough, right? We're going to go back to authenticity. You know yourself well enough. You talk about this. You be honest about it. You figure out where you can affect that change from an organizational standpoint. And then the D is for development. The education, you're developing, you're serving, you're improving, you're leaving everything better than you found it. And when you do that, that makes an impact, and people listen and they pay attention, and whatever their personal beliefs or wherever they may be, and wherever you're meeting them and they're meeting you, they want to be involved, right? When people see change happen that's having a positive effect, there's a gravity to that, right? People want to be part of that. They get pulled in. So, with our Words Matter within the company that our L&D team has been doing, it's a phenomenal course. And it's been cool to watch it evolve, and how people respond to it, and what happens, all the way from our headquarters all the way down to our manufacturing plants, and how that's created conversations and how that's created safe spaces for people to continue this dialogue. And so you have to develop, right? You can't just put a stake in the ground and say, here it is, we're here, right? We're here, now what are we going to build on top of that? So that's your A, B, C, and D. And for us, those have really been the crux of what's helped us get where we are. And what I think has been to cover a lot of ground in a relatively short period of time, that we've really applied this directly. It's always been part of our ethics, right? But coming out and saying this committee, this community, this ERG exists. Yeah, there you go.
That's so helpful, that layout. I love the ABCD framework for folks, and I hope that people are taking notes, because I think that that's a great way to get started and to really think through the different pieces here. And certainly we're recording this, so if folks want to rewatch, that's a great thing to sort of come back to there. And thanks for that, Dave. As our last question, before we look at some of these audience questions that are coming through, I want to turn back to the broader movement in the South for LGBTQ movement, and what companies can be doing together. I think that we've highlighted this in the opening panel a little bit, and a little bit earlier in this conversation, but businesses do possess this unique opportunity to drive LGBTQ inclusion in the South, where state policies, local policies may not be doing that work. And And I'm curious what you all think about, what can and should companies be doing together to build LGBTQ inclusion in workplaces with more challenging regions like the South. And I'll turn that over to Barrett for our final question.
Thank you, Madeline. It's a great point. And, as you mentioned in the plenary, I think the first step in any company moving towards an, LGBTQ inclusion policy or ERG is just around those courageous conversations. I think the first step is there might be such a hesitation to even bring up the issue, but unless you start to talk about it, you're not going to do anything. So, start the conversations, identify those individuals who feel really passionate about the issue. And, you may start as a small group and just, talk about what you could do. You may reach out to, maybe a senior leader if you know that they are open. But I think the first step in anything is just at least to start the conversation. I saw one of the questions pop up about, what if you don't have the leadership support? I think a great thing is to benchmark other companies in your area. I mean, obviously, you could do the whole South, but if you look at your general area, for us would be the upstate. Look at what are the other companies doing, and there are probably other very strong D&I efforts around you. And again, that it kind of goes back to the business case, but then also goes back to look, all these other companies in our area have these strong D&I efforts. They're making the move. They're probably going to attract all the talent that we're trying to get within our company. So I think benchmarking is a really good way, especially for senior leaders, right? If they see other companies in the area doing it, then they're going to want to move forward. So I think being able to benchmark, would be a great way. And, not every company is going to be as open in terms of their PR around their support. I've been so proud of Milliken and so proud of Halsey and our entire leadership for making, kind of public statements on any of our social justice issues. But, it really does almost serve as kind of a coming out metaphor, right? Companies are not coming out in support of the LGBTQ community. And, to your point, if you have multiple businesses in an area doing that, then the amount of weight that can take from a local government or a public policy perspective can be huge. So, how do we get more companies to come out? And I think, having those initial conversations is key. And then ensuring that the D&I leaders at each of those companies are talking to each other. And if you don't have a D&I leader, someone who's just kind of passionate about the cause, so for us in the upstate, making sure that we're talking to the other corporations around the Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson area to make sure that we are all aligned in our D&I efforts, and how can we work together to ensure that the upstate of South Carolina as a whole becomes an LGBTQ inclusive area. I think those are some very tactical, very kind of easy steps to start off as you move towards that LGBTQ inclusion strategy.
Thanks for that, Barrett. And I think that's also a great metaphor, what you said about this is a coming out of companies as well. And it's important for companies to do that. I think that you're right, that if they're not engaging in this, they're going to lose out on some incredible talent and innovation that brings us into the future. So appreciate that. And thank you. This has been such a great conversation to hear more about your journey. And I know that there are several questions coming through. People are eager to ask you about your work. So I'll waste no time in getting to those by starting with this first question. Has Milliken revisited its core values and included actual wording that reflects the practice of D&I and LGBT advocacy at the company? And if so, what was the process for you all? And I think I'll turn that over to Otilia for that.
Thank you, Madeline. It's a great question. And we were actually very fortunate when Halsey Cook, our CEO, joined the company a few years ago. We revisited what's our purpose, vision, and values as an organization. And our purpose statement, which Dave alluded to earlier, starts with "Together we strive." But the whole statement is "Together we strive to positively impact the world around us for generations to come." And if you think about this LGBTQ inclusion work, it really lives within that purpose statement, and it's directly aligned to that purpose statement to positively impact the world, impacting generations, doing this together. In addition, our company 5 core values are integrity, excellence, innovation, sustainability, and people. And one might think that this work lives within the people value, but when you really take a step back and think about it, it also lives within integrity and doing the right thing and creating an atmosphere where people can be their authentic selves so they can give their best and they can create excellence and create innovative solutions. If I can't come to work every day as myself, if I have to cover and I can't show up authentically, how can I be innovative? How can I question things? How can I push the envelope a little bit if I can't even be myself? And then sustainability really lives within that, creating that environment for generations to come. So I don't think we had to change our values or our purpose or revisit them, but they really aligned and fit very well within the work that we're doing. That's a great question. Thank you.
It is a great question, and it's great to hear how you answered it, and I think helpful for folks who are on this call to hear that. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and I believe, yes, okay. I'm looking through my notes here. All of these questions are coming through. What are some of your measures of success or ways of knowing whether or not your ERG's efforts are making an impact both internally and externally? And I believe I'll pass it to George or others who want to step in there.
I'm happy to answer this one.
Great.
So we will be implementing next year a scorecarding process each ERG, right? And so there are several attributes that Raquel, who you guys will meet later, has put into place. And it's things from as simple as participation to senior leadership participation. Also, sort of your impact on the community as well as your impact on sort of the Milliken internal community. And so it's sort of a way to make sure that our resource groups are having the impact that we want, right? There is a large social component and it is a lot of fun, but we're here to do more than that. And so that scorecarding process is going to help us it will help set a standard that we'll be meeting going forward. It's a real positive development for us. Was there a second part to that question, Madeline? I can't remember if there was or not.
I think that you answered it, the ways of knowing whether your ERG's efforts are making an impact both internally and externally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the scorecard will help us sort of find that true norm. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I know we're at time here, but I just want to thank our wonderful panelists very much for not just being here, but for your continued work in this. The Milliken team, I think, knows how much I love them and their work, and it's great to see such a strong effort and initiatives from a Southern company like Milliken. And of course, we didn't get to all of the questions today, but I'm going to round these up for us, send them to the Milliken team, and maybe we can find a way to get them answered for you moving forward. But thank you so much for being here, Milliken, and thanks for allowing us to share your story. This has been so helpful and enlightening for us and hopefully for all of you on the call. And we're looking forward to continuing to see all of the wonderful things that you all do, and appreciate you all being here. And thank you to our attendees for being here. We have our next session coming up at 11:30, so you have a little bit of time before we scoot on over there. But really appreciate all of this wonderful conversation, and thank you all so much. All right, thanks everyone. Talk to you soon.